research complete, I now have a much stronger understanding of the types of objects that I'm going to need to model and create to support the overall context of the character that I've previously crafted. I want to make a log and maybe a small little pond for my little turtle to sit in, and perhaps maybe even a lily pad or two to help establish the overall size and scale. With just the log in the pond water, it's not going to be enough for our audience to understand the scale. Having a reed or a lily pad or maybe even a leaf or two floating in the water is really going to help our audience understand how big and small each of these pieces are, so when they look at the total piece, they're really able to understand it. I like building and blocking out my scene with the character itself. As you can imagine, all of the spatial relationships between these pieces are really dependent on each other. So I'm not going to make this in a new scene file. However, I am going to start crafting this in my own object, or its own object file. So I'm in object mode. I'm going to go in and let's just make a UV sphere. Let's start with that. I'm liking that. And let's scale it up a little bit. And I'm also going to run into the item transform tool. Let's squish this down. Now the reason I like to start with a sphere is it gives us a top and a bottom. And believe it or not, that top and bottom are a really great place to begin for our audience. I like doing a sphere because it creates this cool little transition here on the edge. It's a small little detail, a small little radius that you can easily create with the cylinder. That's another great way of working. 6 to 1, half a dozen to another. I'm going to increase the scale of this a little bit as I start to explore. When we're blocking this stuff out, be real mindful of scale. Continue to ask yourselves, am I making this too big? Am I making this too small? Is my audience really going to understand what I'm providing to them in the context of the scene that I'm creating? It doesn't have to be symmetrical as well. Your scene can be like this. Not everything has to be centered around the origin anymore, and I think I'm probably going to end up with something like this. Let's go ahead and add in another object. Let's add in a cylinder. Now this is going to represent the log itself, and at this point I need to be a little bit more mindful of how all these parts and pieces are working together. I want to make sure that I am being respective of the overall context of the turtle itself. I don't want to make the log too small. At the moment, it's way too small, right? The turtle is dominating the log, which is diminishing the log itself. I'm going to go in and pose the turtle a little bit more. So I'm not too concerned about how the turtle is sitting on the log at the moment. I am looking at how the log is serving the turtle, and that may be a good starting point. I'm liking that. It's almost as if the character has found this nice little log to sit on. I might make it just a little bit bigger and a little bit longer. Yeah, something in there. Let's move it down so it looks like our turtle is just kind of sitting on it. Like I said, I'm going to be going in and posing the character at the end of this process to help me understand how big, or to make it look like the character is sitting on the log itself. But right now, my creative brain is just looking at the size of the log itself. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit here and look at the total context of that log. Yeah, and I'm thinking that that's a good place to go. I like that as the base. It looks like a nice anchor for our character. It's not dominating the entire scene. I may want to think about sculpting something down here at the back to make it taper off and kind of fade off into the ground. And that could be okay. Maybe the idea needs to change ever so slightly, and that the log is rotated like this. Yeah, that could be a much better direction to go towards. Because now the log is kind of like half underwater, half exposed. I like that. That's a cool idea. Of course, naturally, I have to go in and fix the turtle as well. I mean, right now, his head is inside the log, which is not what we want. But this is a good place to start. I'm looking at the total scene here, and I'm just trying to ask myself, is this working? Is this going to work? I'm going to cut the log off at some point underneath the water, or maybe I'll extend the water line a little bit further south along the z-axis to give me a much stronger illusion. But I like this. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab that log. I'm going to go into the over into the side view. Shift D to duplicate it. And we're going to use this one. We're going to create another one like this. Yeah, I'm liking that. That's a good place to go. Let's look at it from the side once again. Let's play around with some angles here. Remember, there are no 90-degree angles inside of nature, so be real mindful of that. Also, I'm also going to shrink the log a little bit as well. This top part that's coming out, let's just experiment. And I really have no idea how this is going to work. Maybe it's a little bit more oblong. Yeah, that might be kind of fun. I want to change my orientation of my tool handles to local, so I can just kind of push it up this way. I'm experimenting with the height here, because I'm wondering that maybe the pose for my character is a little bit more attached to this vertical bit. Like maybe it's kind of wrapping itself around, or it's using that little upward part on the log as an anchor, as it's just sitting in the sun, hanging out. Yeah, that may be kind of fun. I'm also gonna, let's do this. I'm gonna duplicate this one again. Let's go over into the side view, hit the rotate tool. Maybe there's a couple other small bits in here that gives it a little bit more life and a little bit more character. We want our objects to look interesting. We don't want them to be flat and boring. Maybe there's a twig there. An extra branch that got cut off somehow. Let's make it a little bit more unique. Let's pull it off to, I'm going to put it in the background. I don't want it to be a foreground object. Maybe something like that. Make it a little bit more asymmetrical. Not everything has to be symmetrical in our world, especially when it comes to organic shapes like a log. It's not going to be symmetrical. There are no straight lines in nature, and nature is by itself almost chaotic in its production of its details. So we're allowed to do that, and we're encouraged to do that as well. I want to make it a little bit asymmetrical. Maybe there's another one poking out down here. Shift D, just to give it a little of interest. The log is going to have a lot of character moments in it. Yeah, I think what I'm going to do, I like this idea of having a second one, but I'm going to put it way over here in the front, rotate it out. I'm just going to make it a small little nub. I have a long one and a short one. Let's change the angle. I'm not loving the angle. And the reason I don't like the angle is that it was a little too similar to this part over here. Let's grab it, kind of move it around a little bit. I'm trying to make it look like it's its own piece. Yeah, that could be it. I'm not entirely sold on that detail, but that's a good place to go. That's a good place to begin. All right. Now the other thing that I may want to craft in here is the small illusion of a lily pad. And I like that. I saw that in the reference itself. There was little blades of grass poking out of the water, maybe a lily pad or two. These are common ideas that our audience is going to bring with them. It's going to add a lot of depth into the scene itself. So maybe we have some grass blades and a lily pad. That might be kind of fun. Let's just experiment with that real fast and start to understand the size of those and how they relate to our audience's understanding of our character. So a lily pad, let's just do a cylinder this time. I'm keeping this real basic. I'm intentionally trying to make this as simple as I can. I'm just exploring overall size and scale. I'm not trying to make this a finished, polished model on moment one. How big is the lily pad? Where's it going to be in relationship to the character and to the log itself? Is there just one of them? Maybe I have a couple in here. Maybe I have a few lily pads that are sitting right on top of each other. Like this inside the scene. Is that going to support the object? Yeah, I like that. It gives the background a little bit of interest. It's a small little detail that we can add very quickly. I'm going to transform this, believe it or not, into a blade of grass. Just a small little cylinder. Now, I know that a blade of grass is not a cylinder, but I'm just experimenting and exploring right now. I'm trying to figure out how all of this is going to work. And doing this now at this low resolution stage is a great idea. because I can very quickly go in, just make some adjustments to it. I'm trying to find a way, yeah, a little too thick there for a blade of grass. I'm trying to find a way to provide some interest and depth inside the scene itself. Maybe we have a couple of these spread out. I'm just hitting Shift D here, by the way, just to kind of block these out. I can go in and go back in time here a couple steps. There are no straight lines in nature. Keep reminding yourself of that. So if you find yourself modeling things perfectly up and down, you know, give it a small little rotation along all three axes, you know? Nature doesn't have a big game plan when it comes to the placement of these blades of grass. Grass usually kind of grows in clumps, so having a couple of them in there is not necessarily a bad idea. Maybe these little grass blades have grown around the log itself. Perhaps the log is capturing some dirt, some sediment in the river. Yeah, I'm liking that. That's cool, but I think I want to move this entire group towards the back. Hit undo, excuse me. I'm going to grab it. Let's look at it from the top now. I'm just going to grab it, move it towards the back of the model. Make a nice little cluster there. Yeah, let's see what that looks like. Space them out just a little bit, just to kind of get a good idea and layout of how all this is going to work together. Yeah, so if I was the viewer and the audience looking at my scene from this perspective, what would I see? I'd see obviously the turtle. Maybe the picture is more like this. I'd see the turtle. I want to showcase the turtle's face in the final sculpture itself. Having this log come out the front gives us a great sense of depth. Now there's something going off screen that creates an implicit foreground. The turtle's in the middle, but there's not really anything that describes the background. Maybe that's where all of this stuff comes in. This is the power of this blockout stage, is that we can make changes very quickly. Very quickly. Now if we're sitting here looking at the turtle, yeah, there's something behind the turtle. Or maybe we put another group on this side. Let's look at it from the top. I'm just going to rotate this around. Shift D to duplicate it. Put it over here. Also rotate it with the R key. Get my selection. We don't want to have it perfectly in a straight line. All these grass blades, I'm just going to move them down. Yeah, something like that. Just kind of break it up a little bit. I could do this all day. This is a lot of fun. I love creating environments because now it's starting to feel like a really engaging little space. And we have a good game plan here that I'm starting to fall in love with. In addition, I know exactly what the full picture is going to be at the conclusion of this process. I know I'm going to have to make a disc or some sort of plane for the water. I know I have to make a log, a lily pad, and maybe just one clump of grass that I can then duplicate around inside of my pond and begin to populate my scene with some very simple information. We're not trying to make this a 20 million polygon sculpture of a tree log and some water, but some extra details is really going to enhance the believability of our characters. This blockout stage is incredibly important. It gives us a battle plan, a blueprint for what we need to craft so that as we go through our modeling sequence, we have a very targeted look and a very targeted understanding of the objects that we're going to be striving to create.